You think you know what happens if you get pulled over on an ordinary afternoon. You haven't had a drink, you're not speeding, your registration's current, and you've been driving for decades without so much as a fender bender. So when the officer walks up and says something friendly and unexpected, you don't think twice. But what if I told you that request isn't friendly at all? What if I told you it's one of the few things an officer can ask you at the roadside where the honest, polite, completely natural response most people give is the exact sentence that ends up costing them their license before they've even made it home? Picture this. It's the middle of a bright weekday afternoon. Nothing unusual about it at all. You're driving back from the grocery store, sun low enough that you've dropped the visor, radio on, thinking about absolutely nothing in particular. Up ahead, there's a cruiser pulled onto the shoulder, lights on, and you get waved over. You're not worried, because why would you be? You pull over, window down, hands on the wheel, ready to be pleasant and get on with your day. And he walks up, perfectly cheerful, and points down the road at a car parked 40 or 50 yards away. Before anything else, he says, "Can you read me that plate for me?" That request is not idle small talk. And in most states, it is not something you want to brush off carelessly either. Every other question an officer might ask you at a routine stop, you generally have a genuine choice about how much you say. This one sits in a different category, because how you handle it can quietly set off a process that has nothing to do with tickets or points on the spot, and everything to do with whether the DMV decides days later that you shouldn't be driving at all. And the sentence most people say back, the one that sounds honest and reasonable, is very often the one thing that starts that process moving. Over the next several minutes, I'm going to give you the exact wording that protects you here, without you being difficult and without you sounding evasive. I'll walk you through where this power actually comes from, what standard you're really being measured against, and why so many drivers who would have passed easily end up flagged instead. And stay with me right to the end, because reading the plate correctly isn't where this ends. There's a second stage that comes right after it, in the minutes that follow. And it's arguably more dangerous than the plate itself, because it's the part that can end with a letter from the DMV sitting in your mailbox. I spent years working around license offices and DMV hearing officers, sitting in on re-examination cases. And I've lost count of the number of people who walked in having lost their driving privileges over a conversation that lasted less than 2 minutes on the side of a road. And with it, the commute, the grandkids' school pickup, the independence they'd had for 40 years. This isn't legal advice, and laws and procedures vary from state to state, sometimes county to county. It's the plain English version of what I wish every driver in this country understood before they were ever waved onto a shoulder. Let's start with why this matters more than most people assume. If an officer forms the opinion, in that moment, that your vision might not be up to standard, he doesn't need to write you a ticket, and he doesn't need a judge to act. In most states, officers have the ability to submit what's usually called a re-examination request, or a at-risk driver, referral directly to the Department of Motor Vehicles. That single form can trigger a mandatory vision screening, a written test, sometimes even a full road test, and until you complete it, your license can be restricted or suspended. This isn't some rare, obscure power either. States from California to New York to Ohio have versions of this exact mechanism sitting quietly in their vehicle codes, and thousands of these referrals get filed every single year. There's a reason that power exists, and understanding it explains everything about why this is taken seriously. Departments introduced these officer referral programs after enough cases where a driver was clearly struggling behind the wheel, got waved through with a warning, and then caused a serious crash weeks or months later that could have been prevented. Once that pattern showed up often enough in crash data, states built in a fast lane specifically so an officer who notices a real problem in the moment doesn't have to just hope somebody else catches it later. I tell you that for one simple reason. This is not officers being heavy-handed for the fun of it. There's a real safety rationale behind it, and that's exactly why nobody on the shoulder is going to be talked out of using it once they've decided to. Now, the actual standard, because this is exactly where people trip up. Every state sets a minimum visual acuity requirement for driving, and it's almost always measured with a Snellen-style eye chart at your original license test or renewal, commonly somewhere around 20-40 inches, at least one eye, sometimes both, depending on the state, with a wider field of vision requirement layered on top. What the plate reading request at the roadside is really doing is an informal, on-the-spot version of that same check. It isn't the official DMV exam, and passing or failing it at the roadside isn't by itself a citation, but it is exactly the kind of moment that can convince an officer to write up that re-examination referral or convince him there's nothing to worry about and send you on your way in under a minute. And here's the detail worth holding on to above everything else in this video. Just like the actual DMV standard, you are absolutely allowed to be wearing your glasses or contacts when you're asked to do this. If your license already carries a corrective lenses restriction, that restriction exists precisely because the state already knows and has accepted that you need them. Reading a plate with your glasses on isn't cheating the test. It's the only fair way to take it. Before we get to the exact words that protect you, let's clear out a few things people believe about this that simply aren't true, because every one of them has landed someone in real trouble. The first myth is that this is some kind of formal, scored exam the officer is trained and certified to administer, with rules about distance and lighting as tightly written as an actual DMV eye chart. It isn't. It's an informal, subjective read on how you did, and that subjectivity is exactly why what you say and how you say it matters so much. A shaky, hesitant answer reads very differently than a calm, confident one, even if the actual eyesight behind both is identical. The second myth is the most dangerous, because it's half true. A lot of drivers know that if you're missing your registration or proof of insurance in the moment, plenty of states will let you produce it later, sometimes by mail or at the courthouse, sometimes within a set number of days. That's genuinely correct in a lot of jurisdictions, but it has nothing whatsoever to do with a vision concern raised at the roadside. There is no grace period where you tell the officer you'll go get your eyes checked next week and call it settled. If he's concerned enough to act, the referral goes in that day, regardless of what you promise to do later. The third myth is that you can simply argue your way out of it by insisting your license doesn't currently require corrective lenses, so you shouldn't have to prove anything. Maybe that's even true on paper, but arguing with an officer about what your license does or doesn't require in the middle of a stop rarely goes the way people hope, and it uses up exactly the kind of goodwill you actually need in that moment. And the fourth myth is that this only comes up if you've clearly done something wrong. It doesn't. An officer can raise this on a stop that started over a broken taillight or an expired inspection sticker purely because something about how you were driving, drifting slightly, riding the line, slow to react, made him wonder, which is exactly why it's worth knowing about on a completely unremarkable Tuesday afternoon when nothing at all seems to be happening. So let's talk about the 3 ways people lose this before it's even properly begun. The first mistake is getting defensive or flatly refusing. It's an understandable instinct. A lot of what gets discussed around traffic stops is the idea that you don't owe an officer every answer, and that instinct is often correct. Just not here and not like this. Snapping back with, "I don't have to do that," or folding your arms and staring straight ahead doesn't protect you at all. It simply confirms, in his notes, that something about this made you defensive. And defensiveness tends to get written up as reasonable suspicion all on its own. The second mistake is the one that costs the most decent, honest people their license. And it's simply this: talking too much. The officer's friendly, there's a small silence, and people fill silences. So they say things like, "Ooh, I'd need my glasses for that," or "My eyes have been getting worse if I'm honest," or "I do fine in the day, it's the headlights at night that get me." Every one of those sentences is a gift, because in a single breath, you've handed him exactly the kind of concern that turns into a written referral, plus evidence about your driving on nights he was never even there to witness. You could still read the plate perfectly and have that sentence sitting in his notebook regardless. The third mistake comes from pure decency, which is what makes it so frustrating. It's attempting the read without your glasses because you don't want to seem difficult or hold things up squinting bare-eyed while your glasses sit in their case in the center console and fumbling a plate you'd have comfortably read otherwise. There is no rule anywhere that says you have to attempt this uncorrected to prove some kind of point. Doing it without your glasses isn't cooperation. It's just failing slowly, on your own initiative, for no reason at all. So here's the sentence. It's short, it's polite, and it quietly does several jobs at once. Happy to let me just grab my glasses first. I always drive with them. Look at what that actually achieves. Happy to agrees instantly, so there's no defensiveness anywhere near the interaction, and you've signaled you're not being difficult. Let me just grab my glasses means you're now being read correctly, the way you actually drive every single day. I always drive with them. Quietly puts on the record, in your own calm words, that this is your normal, everyday state behind the wheel, not something you scrambled for in a panic. If you don't wear glasses at all, the equivalent is just as simple. Sure, which car did you want me to read? You've agreed, and you've made him point specifically at the one he means, which avoids any confusion afterward about what was actually asked or answered. Then say nothing else. Read the plate clearly, once, and if you genuinely can't make it out, even with your glasses on, don't guess. Guessing under pressure feels natural, but a wrong reading is exactly the kind of thing that ends up in a written referral. What you say instead is calm and complete. I'm honestly not sure I've got that right. No elaboration, no explanation. You can add, if you like, would it be all right if I tried a different one, or one a bit closer? He's entitled to say no, but it costs you nothing to ask. And there are genuinely innocent reasons one specific plate might be hard to read. Glare, a dirty or bent plate, a faded frame covering half the numbers. What you must not do is start explaining why you think you struggled. The moment you volunteer a reason involving your own eyes, you're giving him a statement about your eyesight on the spot, with no preparation and no advice behind it. I'm honestly not sure I've got that right is enough on its own. Stop there. Now, the part that matters just as much as the plate itself, what happens in the few minutes right after. Very often, the officer will keep chatting, and the questions drift somewhere gentler and more personal. When's the last time you had your eyes checked? Do glasses come up on your license? Everything all right driving-wise these days? Sometimes something softer still, particularly with older drivers. Any trouble with your vision generally? You are not obligated to give him a running medical history on the shoulder of the road. You've done the read. As far as the actual question goes, that's already been answered. The polite way through the rest of it is a version of the same idea. I think that covers it. I appreciate you checking, said warmly rather than coldly, and then genuinely nothing further. Here's why that matters so much. If the officer forms the view that your vision might be a real concern, he doesn't need a ticket, and he doesn't need you to admit anything else. He files the referral, the paperwork lands with the DMV, and depending on your state, that alone can trigger a suspension of your driving privileges, pending a formal re-examination sometimes. With your license itself put on hold in the meantime. Everything said in that friendly follow-up chat can end up feeding directly into that report. It isn't small talk, it's information, gathered in the most casual-sounding way imaginable. I want to be honest with you about something else, because I genuinely rather you trusted this video than simply enjoyed it. If your eyesight has actually fallen below what's safe for driving, you shouldn't be behind the wheel. And nothing in this video is about helping anyone dodge a check they genuinely ought to fail. It's about making sure you don't get flagged for a problem you don't actually have, purely because you were flustered, or trying to be extra honest, or left your glasses in your other jacket out of habit. And there's something that quietly works in your favor here. If you have any doubt at all, book an eye exam yourself, on your own schedule, before any of this ever comes up. It's a routine appointment for most people, often covered in part by vision insurance. And a recent, documented exam turns vague roadside concern into an actual matter of record you can point to. Show up prepared, current prescription in hand, and there's very little for a re-examination referral to actually latch onto. And because I don't want to leave you frightened without also telling you what actually happens next, let's walk through the worst version of this afternoon properly, because it is genuinely recoverable for most people. If the DMV does act on a police referral, you'll typically get a letter in the mail, sometimes with a temporary restriction attached, other times requiring you to complete a vision screening or re-examination within a set window before your privileges continue. From there, this becomes an administrative and medical process rather than a criminal one. You book a full, proper eye exam, not a plate on the shoulder of a road, an actual thorough exam with a real optometrist. And in a great many cases, the finding is exactly what you'd expect. Your prescription has simply drifted, the way everybody's does over time. And with updated lenses, you comfortably meet the standard again. You submit that documentation to the DMV, sometimes alongside a form from your doctor, and if you meet the corrected standard, your full privileges are typically restored, often with a corrective lenses restriction added to the license, which, if you're honest, simply describes what you were already doing anyway. It takes a few weeks, rather than being resolved on the spot, and it's a genuine inconvenience, but it's recoverable. What's far harder to recover from is driving on a suspended license without realizing it. getting into an accident during that window, or having an insurer question a claim because you were on the road with a known, unaddressed vision issue. So, if there's one practical thing to take from all of this, the eye exam you book yourself, on your own schedule, is always better than the one you're improvising on the shoulder of the highway for a stranger in a uniform. Let me play it out properly so you can hear exactly how short this is when it goes the way it should. He walks up. Window down, hands visible, engine off. Afternoon before anything else. Mind reading me that plate down there? Happy to let me just grab my glasses first. I always drive with them. No problem. Take your time. You reach over, put them on, take a breath, and read the plate clearly. Once. That's all I needed, thanks. Then, when's the last time you had your eyes checked? And you say warmly, I think that covers it. I appreciate you checking. He nods, tells you to drive safe, and you're gone. The whole thing is under 2 minutes, and it never becomes anything more than that. Now compare that with the version I've heard described far too many times. He asks. You say, ooh, I might struggle. My eyes have been bad lately. He says, go ahead and try anyway. You squint, get a couple of numbers wrong, and now you're standing on the shoulder while he's calling it in. And the conversation has quietly shifted from a license plate to a conversation about your medical history. And a few days later, there's a letter in your mailbox instead. Same driver, same eyesight, same glasses, sitting in the same case, in the same console. One sentence is the entire difference between those two outcomes. So, quickly, what to actually take away from all of this? This is one of the few roadside requests where the wrong instinct, being blunt, over-explaining, or trying to power through without your glasses, is exactly what tends to trigger a formal DMV referral, whatever your actual eyesight turns out to be. You're fully entitled to grab your glasses first, and you should say as little as possible about your eyes, your prescription, or your age beyond the read itself. And if a referral does happen, or you say something that raises real concern, remember that the process moves through the DMV in writing, which is exactly why the conversation after the plate matters just as much as the plate itself. Learn this line the way you know your own plate number. Happy to let me just grab my glasses first. I always drive with them. If this helped you, do two things. Save it somewhere you'll actually find again, because the whole point is having it ready long before you ever need it. And subscribe, because every week this channel breaks down exactly this kind of roadside moment in plain English, so that if it's ever you getting waved onto that shoulder, you already understand what's actually happening better than almost anyone else standing there does. And do one more thing for me. If you know someone who's been driving for 30 or 40 years and has never once thought about this, someone who'd hand over their independence on the side of a road simply because they were trying to be helpful, send this to them today. It's 2 minutes of their time, and it could be years of their freedom. Know the line. Keep it brief. I'll see you in the next one.